Creating your brand is one of the most exciting things you could do for your business, but it's really important. Get it right and this could be the start of an empire. Get it wrong and it could lead to a costly rebrand later on down the line. So in this video, I'm going to talk you through all of the things that you need to consider when setting up your new brand, when designing your new brand, and I'll talk you through this step by step. So for the best advice on how to grow your e-commerce brand quickly and profitably, subscribe to my channel, hit the bell as well, and then you'll be notified every week when I post a new video. So I'm Sarah, I'm founder of the Fastnet agency, and we help exciting up-and-coming e-commerce brands to scale their stores quickly and profitably online. Check out my website, fastnet.agency, for more information about what we do. So one of the biggest issues I see when people are looking to get their new brand up and running is miscommunication between the client and the designer. Now, it's really important that you consider this right from the get-go when it comes to designing your brand, because this could be the make or break of whether or not things work out as part of this process. One of the biggest issues I see is that the client has an idea in their head, a really clear vision of what they want for their brand, but for whatever reason they can't communicate this effectively to the designer, and then the designer creates something that they think is right but is disappointing to the client, and this can lead to all sorts of ructions. So I've got some really good tips of how to be able to portray what it is that you want for your brand, but also how to give your designer enough license so that they can use the creative talents that they have to hopefully improve upon that and make something that will really work for you in the longer term. So when approaching your new brand, one of the most beneficial skills you can bring to the table as the client is a really clear brief. So this is one of the things that I'm going to talk you through, how to create a clear brief for your designer. So obviously the first step to starting out with your brand, unless you're going to design it yourself, is to choose your designer. And I would say the most important thing when choosing your designer is to make sure that this is somebody you can work with. This is a really personal experience for a lot of business owners. This is the fundamental, this is the birth of their baby, you know? And so it's really important that you're working with somebody that you can really relate to and that you can be very honest with and you can communicate well with. So before you start looking at anything else, make sure that you've found a designer that you can really communicate with. Now, personally, I would take time, once you think you've found somebody that you can work with, take time to cultivate that relationship before you actually go and commit to the final rebrand. Now, quite a lot of designers will do like a branding workshop, or they'll do a strategy session, which is kind of a way of dipping your toe in the water for a lesser cost. So maybe you pay for a branding session for the day. It's a minimal cost compared to actually creating the full brand itself, but it gives you an opportunity to work with that person and really get a bit of a feel for that person or that agency to see how they would work with you and whether or not that's going to be a good relationship. So I definitely, when you're looking at considering something, do a sort of test, a trial run before you go and commit to the full rebrand. Now, have you created an effective brand for your business? Was this a good experience, a bad experience? Did something go wrong? Did it all go brilliantly smoothly? I'd love to hear from you. So yeah, pop a comment below and let's get the conversation going. So once you've chosen the right designer, you've found somebody that you can really work with, and then you've gone through and you've looked through their portfolio and you've had a little look at the sort of designs they produce, and you think, yeah, this is something that I think would fit with the sort of theme that I want. You know, bear in mind, designers all work in different ways. They all have different styles. So you've found a designer whose style you really like. So once you've found a designer whose style you really like, the next thing is to be clear on your theme. It's really important that you leave the designing to the designer. That is why you're employing them. That's what they do for a living. Although you might have very clear ideas as to what you want, the designer should be able to bring that extra bit of magic to the process. And it's really important that you give them enough scope, enough leverage to be able to bring their ideas and their creativity to the table. But obviously you want them to be working in line with what you have in your head, your vision. So the way to get around this is to create a mood board or a vision board. I know some people turn their noses up a little bit at this. It sounds a bit hippy dippy maybe, but actually it's really, really effective. There's a range of tools you can use now. Pinterest is one of the best ones for just pinning stuff that you like and being able to build a bit of a theme. Now, the more stuff you can put on this mood board or your Pinterest board, the better, because what a good designer will do is, out of all of the stuff you've put in there, they will start to notice clear themes. They'll start to notice overlapping elements, which they can clearly see as something that you want to incorporate as part of the design. So the more time you can spend on these mood boards, the more stuff you can put in there that relates to the sort of brand you're looking to build, the more idea your designer will have as to exactly what is it that you're looking for, what are the underlying themes that you're looking to work with, and that will enable them to start building out a design that is meeting your needs and much more along the lines of what you're looking for. Now, it's really important on this board that you try and include a whole range of things to enable the designer to have as much kind of stuff to work with as possible, really. So make sure that you include things like color schemes, textures, patterns, maybe include other brands that you really like, and try and incorporate the types of what exactly about that brand do you like. Is it their logo? Is it their styling? Is it their photography? Make sure that you're picking out specifics of things that you like and including them on those boards. Remember, you could always create several boards, not just one. One could maybe be related to the colors, maybe one could be related to brands that you like, maybe another could be related to textures and patterns and stuff that is going to accompany your brand. But make sure that you create a range of images in order to ensure that your designer has everything they need. So step 3 is to think beyond just the design. Remember that your design is not just about aesthetics, it's also about tone of voice, it's about how your brand comes across as a personality. And the more you can kind of try and harness that, the better it will be for your designer in terms of creating designs, but also it will allow you to create a brand that's consistent between design and tone of voice, which is also really important. So think to yourself, is my brand really fun, or is it quite serious? Is it modern and upbeat, or is it, more traditional? How would I look at this brand as an individual? What sort of character traits would they have? How would they express themselves? What sort of words would they use? So by doing that, by going through that process of thinking, actually, what sort of personality does my brand have, and sharing that with your designer, that will allow your designer to create an actual aesthetic to your brand, which fits the sort of social content you're going to put out, and the sort of blog post you're going to write, and the sort of copywriting you've got on your website. And that creates a really good, strong brand, both visually and in terms of the actual content that you're producing. So leading on really from step 3, step 4 is to remember that your brand is more than just a logo. So many people get fixated on the actual logo itself. They expect their logo to be kind of all singing, all dancing. When actually, if you look really carefully at very, very successful brands, you realize that the logo itself is really quite simplistic, that some of the best brands have the most simple logos. But actually what makes up the kind of real aesthetics of the brand is what accompanies that logo. What patterns do they use, what colors do they use, what fonts do they use, how are things displayed on, printed publications or on screen on the website. So try and think beyond just a logo when it comes to your brand, and try and get your designer to create more than just a logo. So when they're presenting things back to you, it's the logo and then accompanying kind of visionary kind of stuff, whether that's photography or it's colors or whatever else to accompany that, so that you're thinking beyond just the initial logo. And finally, step 5, it probably sounds quite obvious, but so many people I think get this wrong, is you really need to sleep on this, okay? When your designer first sends over maybe 2 or 3 or 4 options for your branding, the very best thing you can do is to look at it, take it in, and then walk away from it, sleep on it. Maybe print them out and put them up on the wall, walk past them a few times a day, share it with friends and family, take the time to mull over it, don't rush this process. Because often what you find is that initially when you look at it, you feel a little bit of disappointment because you've got this sort of fairly blurry image in your head of what you want, and inevitably the designer is never going to recreate that fairly blurry image because you're not even 100% sure what it is yourself. But the reality is often, and I see this time and time again, there's a little bit of disappointment when you first see your brand because it's not quite this idea that you had in your head. And actually what you need to be able to do is get over that and then start looking at the designs for what they actually are. And that will only come with a little bit of time. So yeah, sleep on it, share it with friends and family, pop it up on the wall, give yourself a week to think about it if need be. Make sure you've communicated that with your designer, that you want to take your time over this. And then really start to look at those brands for what they actually are. And often what you'll find is that, okay, yeah, maybe they're not the exact vision that you had in your head, but they're better for whatever reason. They're a bit more sophisticated, or they're a bit more workable. And that will only come really with time. So yeah, give yourself a chance to think that over, mull it over before you start firing back feedback to your designer. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this useful. Having watched that interaction between client and designer so many times over the years and creating a new brand, I know the sort of issues that can arise. And often it's not the client's fault, it's not the designer's fault, it's somewhere in the middle. So I really hope that this guide helps to talk you through that process and helps to give you a bit of an idea and an understanding of how best to go about that and manage that process. So once you've got your brand nailed, the next thing you're going to need to do is to set up your online store. So I've done a great video over here comparing WooCommerce and Shopify, the 2 biggest e-commerce platforms. So check that out over here. And before you even get started on your branding, you're going to need to know exactly who you're trying to target. So take a look at this video over here, all about picking your niche and identifying your perfect customer.